Next, we'll move to Governor Chichetti and legislative committee matters.
Thank you. We have Outreach and Legislative Affairs Manager Sanjay Walvakar on the line. Apparently we do not. He was going to give this presentation, but I'm happy to walk through it and give a short.
Sanjay's on the call here.
Oh, he is. Great. All right, well, then let me give an overview, and then I'm going to turn it over to Outreach and Legislative Affairs Manager Sanjay Walvakar to give a little bit more detail. The Legislative Committee has been active even after Sine Die was in early to mid-March. We continue to field requests from sections and from ABA representatives on possible items that the Washington State Bar sponsor or consider. We did have a meeting last week, or earlier this week actually, regarding two items that were brought to us. One from the World Peace Through Law regarding an idea of white papers that would be housed at the USBA and would be of benefit to the sections, which Sanjay will talk a little bit more about. And then also a proposal that is being considered by the American Bar Association, the ABA, regarding prohibiting sale and harvesting of shark fins. We had a brief meeting last week to consider both items. I'll let Sanjay talk a little bit more about the specifics of those. Have decided that further discussion with the involved parties would be helpful, and we're in the process of setting up those meetings right now. And so, Sanjay, I'm going to turn it over to you for some more details about those two proposals, and then I'll come back and talk about the proposed policy regarding legislative actions as sections with Senator Higginson.
Sounds good. Can y'all hear me?
Sanjay, yes, we can hear you.
Great. I don't have too much to add, but if you look at your materials, your late materials, you'll see that the BOG Legislative Committee met this past Tuesday to consider two items. One was WSBA co-sponsorship of an American Bar Association resolution regarding the prohibition of shark fin sales. And you can see that resolution in your materials. This calls upon the ABA to promote the prohibition and criminalization of such conduct, which would apparently close some federal loopholes. And this will go before the ABA House of Delegates in August. This request came to us from an ABA member, and we are working as a committee to make sure that the appropriate folks, including our Washington ABA delegates, talk to the committee and discuss some of the GR-12 implications around WSBA potentially co-sponsoring that resolution. Again, you can see the text of that resolution in your late materials. The other item that the Legislative Committee discussed over the last week was an idea for sections to produce advocacy papers to help legal professionals in various practice areas. The proposal was that these papers would be drafted by sections with the goal of utilizing section members' expertise to help address emergent legal issues. This proposal came to us from the chair of the World Peace Through Law section, and the Legislative Committee decided this week that we would like to explore this idea a little bit further and perhaps invite her and other section leaders to participate in that conversation to see whether this topic is best addressed by the Legislative Committee or perhaps the sections team or the member engagement work group. So we can expect that there will be further discussion on that idea and the ABA resolution in the near future.
Thank you, Sanjay. And just to not give over thanks over and over again, but I think the legislative committee here is doing a little bit more than what we've done in the past, centered only on legislation for the Washington State legislature. We're branching out a little bit. We've already gotten approval for some of the things, but I think this is an important and good work for the WSBA in general and the Board of Governors, because we are now looking at a variety of different issues and making sure that our sections, committees, ABA representatives are better working with us. And I think it's worked out really well so far, that there is a avenue that they can pursue to see if these issues would be appropriate for WSBA sponsorship. And we've been working very hard to ensure that we are responsive and getting back to them right away. And I think that's been appreciated by all involved. The other bullet point on our agenda here is an update on recommendation regarding proposed policy, legislative activity of sections that Governor Higginson and I have been working. That started out in January and March meetings, where we were trying to put together a policy that would allow sections a little bit more freedom and a clear path for them commenting on and participating in the legislative sections and legislative issues. That is still in. We came to the realization that there were actually two legislative policies, and Governor Higginson and I, although we could have passed this a couple months ago, it was my preference that we take a little bit more time to make sure that the committee had a recommendation to make to the Board of Governors as a whole, and also perhaps to take a look at that second policy and see if the two could be joined or consolidated, so that we're not talking about multiple policies anymore. And Governor Higginson has been hard at work working with General Counsel Shanklin to make sure that, or see if we can make that happen. So I would invite Governor Higginson, if she has any thoughts on that process, to give her comments now.
Thank you, Kyle. I have nothing further to add.
Okay. And so I expect that we will have that issue for a vote at the next Board of Governors meeting in June.
Rajiv, can I get in the queue?
Of course. We have one member comment. I'm going to go ahead and just deal with that now before I forget and get terribly embarrassed by doing so, because the people on the phone don't have the ability to wave their hands at me to remind me. And then we'll go right to you next, Governor Hunter. If
Okay.
Ms. Hawkins would like to be connected to us, that'd be fantastic. You can't see it, but Rex is furiously plugging cables together and
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so you can hear me now?
Yes.
All right, so I guess I was expecting the vote to be today, but I'll go ahead and make my comments anyway. First of all, I want to thank the Board of Governors for putting together this policy and for putting trust in the sections and moving forward with clarification that the sections have a very important role with regard to legislative matters. We appreciate that recognition that we should be able to comment and speak with legislators and the legislature on issues of concern. We understand that issues in the legislature may have differing effects on different subject areas and thereby different sections. And as we have always done, we understand that we speak for our section when we do make comments. We do understand that the legislature should be advised if a bill provision affects more than one section. The preamble language of the proposed policy should be amended or at least understood to mean that when a bill has those kind of multiple effects, both such sections should still be able to present points of view within their subject area, since having the legislature know both effects is better than the legislature not learning of either position. I also note that Section 2B is very dependent upon Section 2D. We must have a nimble process given the fast pace during the legislative session. If we are not allowed to proceed because of unreasonable delay at the other steps in the policy, the entire policy is unworkable. Sections will have to be able to trust that the other people involved will understand that decisions during a legislative session sometimes need to be made in hours or a day, not in multiple days or weeks. Section 2C refers to identical bills
Please mute yourself. Nancy, sorry.
and identical.
Please mute yourself, whoever just called in. Go ahead, Nancy.
I'm sorry, did you want me to stop for a minute?
No, go ahead now.
Okay. Identical, using the word identical in Section 2C may be too strong a term. A bill could be changed the next year by only a few words, and those few words not having anything to do with the issue that a section wants to comment on and for which it got permission the year before. It might be more appropriate for this policy to refer to substantially identical provisions rather than an identical bill. So again, thank you for moving this policy forward. I think it is great progress in repairing some problems of the last few years.
Hawkins, and then we have another public comment brought forward by the Real Property and Trust section. It's a memorandum which will be forwarded to everyone. But Director Nevitt, would you like to read that into the record for us?
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment to the proposed policy for sections proposing or responding to legislation. These comments are primarily directed to Section 2 of the proposal. While RPPT sometimes initiates or is involved in the submittal of probate and trust legislation, most of that work occurs before a legislative session begins, and enough time exists for the proposed process to operate. Because of that, the section is not commenting on Section 1 of the proposed policy. However, Section 2 of the proposed policy unreasonably restricts a section's ability to respond timely to bills that are introduced in the legislature with or without any advance notice, and thus RPPT strongly opposes the draft policy. The proposed policy fosters an antagonistic relationship between sections and the WSBA lobbyists rather than a collaborative relationship that empowers the Washington State Bar Association to meaningfully contribute subject matter expertise to lawmakers who desperately need to hear from subject matter experts as they craft public policy. Some background is helpful in understanding RPPT's concerns. The real property probate and trust section is the largest of all the WSBA sections and historically is asked to review, analyze, assess, and potentially take action on literally hundreds of pieces of legislation annually. This process requires the section's executive committee members to personally become involved with each and every one of these bills. As the Board of Governors knows, the section's executive committee is comprised of lawyer volunteers, all of whom have busy law practices. Every year, the executive committee members know that countless hours will be dedicated to the service of our section, the Washington State Bar, the legislature, Washingtonians generally, and the greater judicial system by the contribution we make towards limiting the passage of bills that, while well-intended, may result in serious and significant unintended consequences. The proposed policy takes an already daunting task and makes it so unpleasant that it is likely to become impossible. For generations, RPPT has served the state by voluntarily contributing subject matter expertise to lawmakers. Historically, the system has worked well. Aided by the WSBA lobbyist, the section becomes aware of bills that impact the practice of law within the section's expertise. With dialogue between executive committee members and the WSBA lobbyist, the section is able to prioritize bills that require comment. Of the hundreds of bills reviewed, most are set aside, but those that merit action require an intense commitment of time by committee members. Prioritization depends on many factors, including, among others, the substance of the bill, perceived unintended consequences, and information from the WSBA lobbyist describing the likelihood of the bill advancing. For example, in years past, it would not be uncommon for the section to initially have a strong reaction to a bill, but refrain from becoming involved in the process because the WSBA lobbyist confers with the bill sponsor and assures the section that the bill is not a legislative priority and is likely to die on its own. In other cases, however, the WSBA lobbyist, following consultation with the bill sponsor, may suggest a sense of urgency in responding because the timeline for meaningful comment is very short. It is not uncommon for an executive committee member to become initially aware of a bill, conduct a preliminary assessment, consult with the lobbyist, conduct a full analysis of the bill, brief the entire executive committee, collect votes from executive committee members as to the need for section comment, prepare written comments, and participate in all hearings, all within a 48 to 72 hour period. In those cases, executive committee members set aside their own practices temporarily and devote hours to the preparation of written and sometimes oral comment designed to assist the legislature in crafting quality laws and public policy. In this relationship between the section's executive committee members and the Bar Association lobbyist, all of the goals sought to be achieved by the proposed policy happen naturally and efficiently. The proposed policy, however, converts the WSBA lobbyist from a team player into a gatekeeper, conceptually preventing sections from participating in the legislative process. The ability of a section's executive committee to meaningfully participate in the legislative process is entirely dependent on a good, trust-based, working relationship between the section's executive committee members and the WSBA lobbyist. That relationship cannot be created by policy, and any policy that forces a fire hose flow of information and activity through a process that is restricted by the actions or inactions of a single person will fail. It must be remembered that before any section may take a legislative action, a supermajority of the voting members of the executive committee must approve the position. Speaking only for RPPT, this process garners input from practitioners on many sides of an issue because of the diversity of section membership. The proposal vests excessive power in the WSBA lobbyist, delegating to that person the absolute discretion to prevent a section from serving one of the vital activities section members expect from the section and on which the crafting of quality public policy has depended. RPPT agrees that its ability to contribute meaningfully to Washington's lawmaking process has failed during the last 3 legislative sessions. RPPT suggests, however, that the solution to the problem is greater communication and trust between sections and the WSBA lobbyist rather than more barriers and antagonism. You're on mute, Mr. President.
Governor Cicchetti, you had your hand up.
Yes. So I'd like to just address a couple of those items. I think the more appropriate place to address many of the concerns that the RPPT section has is in our committee, and I'd ask Executive Director Nevitt to forward to me, Governor Higginson, and Outreach Manager, Legislative Affairs Manager Walvikar, those comments. Also, in response to Ms. Hawkins' comments on Section 2C, we have talked about the word identical, actually, and we, for all of these comments, it's a fine line that we have to walk to make sure that GR 12 is being satisfied and that any legislation that the Washington State Bar Association would be sponsoring, including that coming from sections, complies with court rules. Now, the whole idea of this policy is not to have a gatekeeper. It's quite the opposite. And I fully appreciate the comments of the RPPT, but it is the whole idea of this policy is to better facilitate a teamwork approach between the WSBA and the section. If folks don't think that we've got that quite right, then I would encourage further communication with the legislative committee so that we can consider those. We won't be able to accommodate all requests and open it completely merely because we are governed by court rule on what we can consider. So we are acting within the confines able to and I these and the folks who are commenting to appreciate that, but also appreciate the fact that we are trying to move this in the right direction. We do see the benefit of section their leadership expertise to the legislature so that they can inform senators and representatives on proposed legislation and give the benefit of their experience. So that is the intent. And again, I encourage Governor Higginson, if she has any comments about that, to chime in.
Yes, I would echo what Governor Cicchetti said, and I'll just say I'm a little bit frustrated that after two requests to sections to give the legislative committee comment so that we could synthesize it into the policy that is being proposed to the board, that we didn't hear from people until today. It isn't on for action, however, so there certainly is time for us the legislative committee to rework it as we may, as the majority deem appropriate. I'm appreciative of the comment, but I will say that we were in fact very mindful of trying to acknowledge the need for a timely and really quick response. And when the solution is proposed that there should be greater communication and trust between the lobbyist and the section, I don't see the policy as written as being in any way prohibiting that relationship from occurring. So those are my comments. Thank you.
And to add on to that, it should be a living, breathing policy that we are starting with, and maybe multiple committees and folks should be involved with this. Not the least of which would be Governor Hunter on member engagement, and I'm hoping that can do a better job of also involving that committee and Governor Hunter to make sure that we are adequately vetting this throughout all avenues of member engagement to get their thoughts as well. So multiple different areas, multiple different people. If we do pass policy in June, I expect that this will continue to be given consideration, revisions as we enter into the fall and into the next legislative session, how we can make it better, how we can improve it, and make it more friendly to members from across the state.
Thank you, Governor Cicchetti. We have Governor Stevens has his hand up, and I know it doesn't go with the policy I've established, but given that we've gone to the virtual world, I seem to be slipping back into trying to accommodate all the comment possible so the governors have it to their attention. There's one more public comment. Governor Stevens, do you want to hear that first, or do you want to speak first?
Excuse me, Rajiv, but I was in the queue somewhere, so please, keep me there.
How do I know if you're in the queue or not? I'm sorry, did you tell me earlier?
Because I told you, yes, I did. And you said okay. And just want to be heard. So whenever everybody's done,
all right. Governor Hunter and Stevens, do you want to hear the public comment first, or do you want to talk first?
I'll hear the public comment.
Governor Hunter?
That's fine.
All right. Ms.
That's fine.
Ann Fitzsimmons, the Rex, if you fantastic. Ms. Fitzsimmons.
Thank you. I am on the RPPT Executive Committee. I apologize that our memo is late in the process. I do recall seeing an email come to section leadership. It was. I just apologize. I mean, we probably should have been involved in the process sooner. Because of the way that our executive committee meetings laid up, we had a meeting just a couple weeks ago, and that's when the policy was discussed with the whole executive committee, and the problem as it appeared to RPPT became apparent. I mostly wanted to just comment and let you know that there are several RPPT members on the phone. We've been listening in on the meeting so that we could participate in this portion of the discussion to the extent you'd like us to answer questions. Our concerns were laid out in our in our memo this morning. And while I understand that the committee is trying to solve a problem, I'm not sure what the problem is that is trying to be solved. My historical experience with the legislative process and working through the section was primarily more than 3 years ago. And I will say that at the time, the lobbyists kept our section very involved in all of the discussions as they were evolving over the bills that were of concern to us. So if this policy is trying to create that relationship, then we're in favor of the creation of that relationship. Where we are struggling is with the notion that the section may develop a very strongly held opinion about a bill and then be prohibited by our lobbyists, whoever that person may be. And remember, this is going to be an enduring policy, so this is not a comment directed at our current with the lobbyists or anybody in particular, but the notion that the section may develop a subject matter expertise opinion on an issue and then be prevented from sharing those thoughts with policymakers in a timely and meaningful way, that seems to subvert the purpose of the sections with respect to adding subject matter expertise to the legislature. And that's why we use the term gatekeeper in our memo. We're all about facilitating a good working relationship. That's what, in my experience, we've always had with the Bar Association lobbyists. We've had difficulties in recent years, but I really believe that's a matter of communication, trust building, and something that, as a matter of personal relationship, has to be worked upon rather than policy. Thank you.
Governor Hunter, Governor Stevens, and Governor Clark.
Oh, Mr. President,
Okay.
also I see PJ hand waving. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, he's using his physical hand? All right. Physical hand, Grabicki is now in the queue as well.
Okay, am I up, Mr. President? This is Kim.
Yes, Governor Hunter.
Okay, first of all, Ms. Fitzsimmons' comments are very well taken. I have discussed this at some length with President-elect Schetti, but I just want to reiterate that it may have been helpful with this legislative policy if the Member Engagement Committee had been involved from the get-go in communicating with the sections. It is the intention of the Member Engagement Committee to be a direct connection between the Board of Governors, the sections, and the members. We might have been able to employ some very focused effort on getting some comments from members who are very busy and sometimes don't read all the emails when they're first coming out, especially in this crazy situation we've got going now. But what we could have done is made phone calls to executive committee members and just some members that are always very active with their sections and asked for some information regarding this policy rather than having to sit and wait for comments to come in, which is what I did on the policy from the court regarding the COVID. I asked the solo and small practice about their concerns and questions, and I got a bunch of emails back. So the whole purpose of the member engagement is to foster an open and constant communication with the sections that sometimes the governors aren't able to do because they have 9 million other things they have to do. I'm just trying to get the Board of Governors to remember that the Member Engagement Committee is here, and please utilize us to be a direct connection to the sections and the members. There is absolutely, it boggles my mind that the Member Engagement Committee wasn't even considered when this policy decision-making was initiated. We could have been a tremendous help in gathering up information such as Ms. Fitzsimmons shared about how the sections are feeling about being able to communicate with the legislative members, what am I thinking of, liaisons and lobbyists on these issues. So I'm going to continue to try to beat this into everybody's head that the Member Engagement Committee were there and ready, but we have to be told, we have to be asked sometimes, as we don't know these things are going on. So just tossing that out there for everybody's consideration. Again, Ms. Fitzsimmons, thank you very much for your comments, and Ms. Hawkins, they are appreciated.
Great, thanks. Now we're going on to Governor Stevens, then we have Governor Clark, then we have Governor Gerbicki, Public Member Gene Cotton, and then Governor Shichetti.
Okay. I was just wondering how you wanted to take that. So I guess the first thing I want to say to everyone, but especially to Kyle and to Governor Higginson, because of the work that you do. I think since we have a association of volunteers, I've always taken the posture that there are times that it almost takes nearly you're about to act when people really realize, what's going on and what's happening. The good thing, and I hope you see it as a good thing, is that people have now recognized this and have actually taken the time to weigh in and taken the time to weigh in before we come up to final action. And while I understand that can be frustrating, I would encourage people not to take that posture, but to say, aha, we finally have gotten their attention. And they've now seen this, but they've seen this from the Board of Governors, and they say, we've got to do something about that. I would ask Ms. Hawkins, I'd ask Ms. Fitzsimmons, I hope I have the names right, to not only give your comments, but I think what would also be helpful is specifically if you have alternative language you'd like to propose, that you submit that as well. So we're not trying to divine what you mean, but we actually have tangible what kind of revision that could be made that would work for you. And I also want to, state from the outset, and there's an old adage, no good deed goes unpunished. But in fact, and so I want to make sure the committee members aren't up against it, because actually, I remember at the beginning of this, the whole point was to actually provide freer ability of sections to comment on legislation and comment on and respond to legislators, or for instance, like the section I come out of, civil rights, commenting on a bill that's coming on and, kind of what the rules of the road are. I think some of your, the comments you've made are well taken. And, it's always the thing, the drafter works on it, and only hearing from those who are in the drafting process, you think you've got it perfect. And then we finally hear from somebody who says, well, how about this? How about that? So, one, I thank you all for getting back to us. I ask you all to not only get back to us with the comment, but actually propose what you think would be a workable solution. And I want to recall and remember, and I'm looking especially at Governor Swigel when I say this, there was a time when, to me, there was a over restrictive effort to say, oh, a section can't comment because all of WISBA had to be on board with what they do, and it really tried to tie the hands of sections in their subject matter, and so I think there is this effort to actually provide more freedom, but with responsibility, which is the whole GR12 piece. So,
point of information, I think that is currently the policy.
Good point,
Great.
Governor Stevens.
Next, we have Governor Clark, and then Grabicki, Gene Cotton, and Governor Cicchetti.
Sure. Thank you, Rajiv. First, I want the board to know that Carla has done a tremendous amount of work on this, and this is something that is not a new issue. It's been vetted for at least 3 months, and in fact, if we will remember, it was on the March one, and there was a vote of the BOG, and it was a split vote, and Rajiv voted that we don't adopt as is, and so that's went back, and that's where we are. Certainly, from my mind, the policy is not meant to harm anybody, but certainly there has been ample time to comment. There's been and whatnot, but I mean, certainly still do. So, I mean, yeah. Thank you so much.
Just to be clear here, next we have Grabicki, Cotton, and Cicchetti. But if anyone wants to talk about commenting, that I won't stop you. But that horse might be beaten to death. This is on for action, but it doesn't sound like the board is going to take action today. And comments are always appropriate and welcome. Governor Grabicki.
Thank you. I'm the liaison to Triple LT, not to RPPT. Have been now. This is my second year. I've been a member of RPPT for a long time. I know that RPPT has been frustrated the last 3 years with its ability to deal with legislative proposals that come up in the legislature. And they are the largest section by far. They're about 10% or more of our active members. And I think that we want to pay attention to their concerns. And I know that the committee is paying attention to their concerns. I would suggest, I agree with what Alex said. I at this point, if either Sanjay or Kyle or Carla could send the current language in a Word document to both Gene Cotton and to the RPPT Executive Committee and ask them to provide red line proposed revisions back. And then if the committee could reach out to those sections and have a conversation, I believe that you would all get to common ground very quickly, and we will have built a lot of goodwill with a whole bunch of folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor Grabicki. Public member Gene Cotton.
You know, the point's been made, and I'm going to reiterate it. This draft policy was not designed to hamstring the section. Rather, it was designed and intended to restore rights that were removed by the legislative policy changes that I refer to as the Brady Amendment back in, I think it was 2012, but I won't swear to that's the year, where the bar did a 180 and imposed a one-voice policy so that sections that had competing interests in a bill could not both speak unless they were both speaking in terms of both opposing or both supporting the legislation. I'm really struck by the comments of the RPPT representative because this policy change proposal would restore the rights that she is now saying don't need to be changed. And I think if you're going to send this draft back out to various stakeholders for review, that you also send the current policy and the one that existed prior to the current policy so they can really see that this is not an effort to hamstring, but rather it's an effort to open the door. And it's not an effort to expand. This is a phased process, as Governor Schicchetti said. This is to restore first, then look at what can be done to even improve, augment, refine, whatever later. And a great deal of effort's gone into this by Governor Higginson and the other members of the committee, of which I was one, along with Governor Stevens and others. So I'm very concerned that the type of comment you're getting from some folks do not recognize the benefit of this. And yes, there is always room for improvement in the proposal, but I encourage a little bit more research by these stakeholders before they comment negatively. Thank you.
And Governor Schicchetti, I think you might get the last word on this.
All right, thank you. And I don't want to reiterate or repeat what other folks have said. I was going to say it happens take things far better than I do, and I appreciate his involvement on the committee as well. And that was one of the reasons why I leaned on him heavily to continue his service to the Legislative Committee. And I agree with his comments 100%. Frustrations that arise out of this, I think, are that everybody recognizes the need to move this forward. And I don't believe it's on for action today because we purposely decided to do that at the next meeting in order to consolidate the two policies and to give additional time for that process. The comments from the RPPT and Ms. Fitzsimmons are both received. I don't want people to get bogged down in the frustration of we're not addressing this, or we're not moving so quickly, or that variety of different pointed points that have been made. I think, again, this is a living, breathing policy. It's intended to open up the sections. It's intended to restrict them. It's not intended to create a gatekeeper to prevent that. It's what we've heard from the legislature that they want to see, and it's a step in that direction. So let's all presume good intent. And if it's not too late to make suggestions, make comments, provide us with red lines, I think that is all good information that will continue through April and May and June. And if we come to a vote, which I hope we will in June, to adopt this policy, it may not be perfect. So let's continue to comment in August and September and October and throughout the next year, and let this as the best we can for all sections. And it'll never be all things to all people, and there will always be questions. But I invite a continuing dialogue on that going forward, and let's not get frustrated with each other in the process. Thank you. And Jamdar, I think you are in mood.
You are correct, Governor Schicchetti. Just to be clear, the comment period WSBA on all matters always is forever and always to our members, whether matters are closed, open, or in process. The other point of information is technically this is all on for action under my presidential authority. Everything I put on the agenda is always ripe for the BOG to act on, but it sounds like there's no motions here, and we'll still go on back to committee and come back again in June, most likely. Not seeing any other further virtual hands raised. I want to thank everyone for their participation and comments in the morning's half of the meeting. Some of you are feeling hungry. I'm getting some grumbly looking comments, and using the official gavel of the smallest order, I will adjourn us until 1 o'clock. However, I want to remind everyone that at 1 o'clock, we're going to have very special guests. The Supreme Court will be joining us. They may be on the phone line. They may be in the Zoom conference room. We're going to be hearing on a very pertinent and pressing question that the Supreme Court is going to deal with on the 27th in their en banc session, which is the bar exam during the coronavirus. I intend to treat the justices as I do governors as special guests to our meeting who need the same information we do. We're going to be hearing from our regulatory department and from student representatives from the 3 law schools on their perspectives. So what I'm asking is that you all don't be late and show up at 1:01 or 1 o'clock. You could all try to show up at 12:55. That'd be great. Governor Stevens.
Yeah, I just wanted to, for the record, thank Governor Higginson for the work that she's been doing on this, knowing that it's a heavy task and it's an arduous task. But thank you, Carla, and please hang in there.
Thank you, Governor Stevens. I want to recognize everyone who worked on that hard, and especially Governor Higginson, who's been shepherding this along. And that's it. I'll see you all at 12:55. Our meeting will resume at 1 o'clock. Thank you so much.